Hi. Today we are responding to Dr. Stern Cardinale of Creation Myths. Um, I recently did a post on my community page on my GTF model, as well as upcoming video that I had done that I scheduled for tomorrow on responding to Erica's physical impossible video and well, there's some people that have replied or asked a question, and Dr. Dan Cardinale, Dr. Dan Stern Cardinale, uh, basically replied, and he is a critic, and um, he came up with a particular argument. You could tell that his argument was something he came up with on the fly. It was something that it was clearly not well thought out. Um, but he came up with it and he was throwing that at me as if that was an actual argument that responded correctly to my position or my model. And essentially, the argument is claiming that all that heat is somehow going to be redeposited back into the crust. Okay. Now, I don't know if Dan thought I was just simply willy nilly taking the crust and pushing it into the heat in the crust and pushing it into the mantle. But that's actually not how I did it. There was three different mechanisms that I used to bypass conduction. Um, you got convection, which the speed of convection is what caused advection to happen and to speed up, and it would have accelerated and it would have removed the heat at the upper mantle and lower crustal boundary and pull it in there. You can even Google this. It's true. It would do that. Um, all right. And of course, this heat was expelled by volcanic eruption. So I used mantle convection, advection, and volcanism to get the heat out of the crust. Okay. So essentially, originally Dan's argument was if the crust is touching the atmosphere, then all that heat in the atmosphere go into the crust. That was his original argument, which didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but that was what he was arguing. And it's like, no, for one thing, this is a global flood, so it would have been underwater to begin with. The water would have acted as a buffer between the atmosphere and the crust anyhow. And so he decided to say, oh, well, then all that heat that's going into the water, of course, not all the heat's going in the water, only some of it's going in there. But he's saying that all that would be redeposited back into the crust. And that's false as well. It wouldn't be redeposited. It actually violated a law in physics called the second law of thermodynamics. But we'll get into that in a second. But no, it would not actually go in reverse like that and be redeposited back into the ground. All right. Essentially, you would need the argument that Dan proposed is a Hugh Ross level argument. It's the type of argument you expect Hugh Ross to make. Because remember when he made that argument about helium inside zircon crystals, if it could slip out, maybe it could slip back in. It's like Dr. Lyle told me in the interview. He said, "Yeah, try to do that with a perfume bottle, and all of it comes out. See if it all goes back inside." It's like no, that's not how diffusion happens anyhow. So, but anyway, essentially it's like that kind of argument. Like, well, if you can get it out, maybe we could put it back in. You know, but it's not that simple. Okay, first of all, the crust and the heat would have not in the water would not have been touching. The heat in the water would have caused it to instantly done a rapid evaporation. Of course, this water would have been replaced, of course, replenished by because it would increase cloud covering at the same rate, and it would, you know, increase rainfall as a result. So it would have replenished the loss of water. But the point is that the crust would never have been touching the heat inside the water. The heat would have evaporated fast. The latent heat removal would have removed the heat from the water. So you got processes that are working really fast, super fast to get rid of the heat in the crust, and super fast to get rid of the heat in the water. So you don't have these two touching. But the problem gets worse. There is actually a law in thermodynamics called the second law of thermodynamics. It got some other technical way of explaining it about leading to disorder and entropy and things like that. But bottom line, though, on this is that it also mandates that that heater or hotter and warmer regions tend to or do move to cooler regions. Okay, so like you put a couple of ice or a couple of ice into a coffee, the coffee's heat automatically gravitates to the ice, melts the ice. Heat transference can occur, but it occurs within the limit of the laws of thermodynamics. It never violates the laws of thermodynamics. When you do heat flow, it doesn't defy the laws of thermodynamics. When you do heat transference, it does not defy the laws of thermodynamics. Okay, the laws of thermodynamics is still set no matter what. You can't get around these. Okay, and so what he was proposing would violate the second law of thermodynamics, and this was pointed out to him. The third thing is that he would even if we were to say, let's say if the heat really was touching the crust, it's not. But let's just say that it was, um, and let's pretend, mind you, that Dr. Dan Stern Cardinale is not violating the second law of thermodynamics, which he clearly is. But let's assume that he isn't. Okay, let's pretend like he isn't. He would still need a mechanism. Even then, he would still need a mechanism to put it back in the crust. He don't just suddenly go into the crust just by touching it. That's not how that works. Okay. I had to use three different mechanisms to get heat out of the crust without going through conduction. Okay. Um, Now you can't do that the opposite way because how would you be able to get evection? Evection wouldn't accelerate or push the other direction just simply because you got the crust hot. If it was that simple, Dr. John Baumgartner would use that argument. And of course, my model doesn't claim that the crust heat up and therefore evection moved. My argument claims that the mantle convection heat up and accelerate it with the heat. And at the mantle, the upper mantle and lower crustal boundary, this would have pulled the heat out of the crust by way of advection, which is the physical movement of heat, and it would have pulled it out in the direction of the mantle, and this would have expelled via volcanic eruptions. Okay, so so my model would not or would you would still have to have a mechanism, okay, to put the heat back into the ground. Now, three times I think it was two or three. I asked Dr. Cornell, asked Dan, what do you have a mechanism by which to reinsert that heat into the ground? And he ignored the question entirely. He never once answered the question. I'm not saying he answered and it just was an answer I didn't like. I'm saying he acted like I didn't even ask the question. I mean, he never responded to it ever. Why? Probably because he knows I'm right. Because you not only would you would need a mechanism, but what mechanism would he use? Well, he can't use convection. Okay, that would work on the other side of it, and that would only pull heat out of it. It wouldn't put heat back in it. Um, so okay, can't use advection because advection wouldn't move just simply by heating up the crust anyhow. Okay, so what mechanisms would be left? Conduction, and conduction is really slow. You see why he wouldn't bring it up what you would use to push into the crust, right? Because if conduction is like super slow, conduction is where the heat is sipping through the molecules of a solid. So it's moving through the molecules of a solid, and it's like really, 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 really slow. I mean, extremely slow. To call it slow is an understatement. It's extremely slow. Okay, even modern rates of mantle convection without all the heat, and even the modern rates of the way advection would move, is faster than conduction. Even their modern rates. So conduction is really, really, really slow. Okay, so essentially, think about it for a second. You'd be using a really slow process to try to redeposit the heat back in when really fast processes inside the crust, inside the mantle, inside the water is getting rid of the heat. So even if you could get a few joules of heat inside the crust, it would go out as just as fast as it went in. It does you no good to use a super slow process to try to redeposit the heat back into the crust when super fast processes got it out. It does you no good. And so essentially, that was what the problem was. So I'm calling it redepositing heat inside the crust theory or response. His response just doesn't doesn't really work at all. It violates the laws of physics. It has no mechanism by redepositing the heat back in, and on top of that, the crust and the heat is never actually touching. The water is cooler than the crust. So what did Dan Cardinale do after this? What did he do? Essentially, all he did was assumed his position. He assumed it would automatically be plasma no matter what. And it's like, no, no. How would it be plasma if all that heat is being removed uh, really, really rapidly? It wouldn't be plasma at all. Um, Essentially, he's trying to say that the crust would be melted. No, it wouldn't have been melted. The heat would have been taken out of the crust super fast. So by definition, it would not be plasma. Um, and then he tried to straw man me. He tried to misrepresent my model. He actually said, well, if you have the mantle and the crust, uh, uh, cooler than the water, and the water's hotter than the mantle and crust, which is not even physically possible. It's not physically possible to put the water hotter than the mantle or the crust for that matter. But essentially, he's arguing something that's physically impossible. But here's the thing: it was a straw man argument, and it was an intentional one because I had already told him before he said that the water is not hotter than the surface or the mantle. It's not. It's cooler, and it's not. And the heat's been taken out of the crust and taken out of the water. And even today, in present oceans, the ocean water is cooler than the crust. So the normal direction for heat uh, transfer would be actually like going to the core, mantle, crust, and then ocean water, air, atmosphere, and space. That's the normal direction because he always flows to the cooler regions. Always. That's not up for debate. It's not up for dispute. It's not a question of maybe we can try to get it to go the opposite way. If you can go one way, we can go the other. No, that's the way in which I'm set this up is completely in agreement with the laws of physics. The way Dan wishes to put heat back into the crust violates the laws of physics. Big difference. It is not, oh, well, you just got some kind of double standard. You could take it out, but we can't put it back in. You can't put it back in because you putting it back in the way in which they are trying to do, violates the laws of physics. It violates them. What I'm doing is invalidating. If you could Google what I'm doing, and it will sit there and say yes, advection will pull heat out of the crust if mantle convection is moving that fast at the upper mantle lower crustal boundary. It will actually pull out heat, even miles and miles of crust. It will do that. Uh, so this, what I'm doing is completely 100% in accordance with the laws of physics. What Stern Cardinale is doing is violating the laws of physics. That's why I'm saying no. I'm not saying no because I have some sort of double standard. No, I'm saying no because his argument does not work with the physics. The physics itself, with the physics or my model, both of them, it does not work. So that's why his argument did not work. Now you could tell straight off the bat, Dr. Dan obviously came up with this on the fly. Um, just it's not a well thought out idea. It really isn't. It's kind of silly actually when you think about it. But it's not very well thought out. And so, and in all honesty, I hate to say it, but it right now, as of right now, it is the worst argument I've heard in response to my model. The worst. Okay. It's not the only bad argument in response to my model, and it may not even be the worst tomorrow. For all I know, someone else might come up with a even worse idea than what Dr. Dan Cardinale had come up with. But right now, as of right now, this one is tops the cake on terrible ideas. It violates the laws of physics. There's zero mechanism that could put it in there fast enough that could trump the processes that are taking it out. And uh, like I said, this it violates the laws of physics. So I mean, it does. So what am I supposed to do? Allow it, even though it violates the laws of physics? What I'm arguing isn't violating the laws of physics. What they're arguing violates the laws of physics. What Dr. Dan Cardinale is arguing violates the laws of physics. So that's a huge difference. But anyway, I didn't mean for this to be a long video. I just thought that was kind of interesting that Dr. Dan Cardinale had presented that, uh, and so I decided to make a real quick video responding to that particular argument. And and you guys, if y'all haven't seen my community page, I've posted two different other comments recently. Check them both out, please. And I will catch you on the next one. And thank you for watching Apologetics 101.